Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Again, I am Katie Batesman, the Managing Director, Community and Partnerships at She Can Code, and today we're discussing rewriting routes into tech. I've got the wonderful Claudia Cohen, Director of the Fosse Academy, with me today to explore how the journey into tech is being redefined. And we're going to dive into her own work championing inclusive hiring, the power of mentorship, and why representation truly matters. Welcome, Claudia. Thank you so much for joining us today on Spilling the Tea. It's a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, we'd love to start with a little bit about you, if that's okay, to set the scene for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I never knew that I wanted to get into the tech industry. It wasn't something that I ever grew up thinking that I wanted to do. To be honest, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I studied languages at university and then did a test online that said I'd be good at sales. So I decided to apply for lots
Oh,
of different jobs and got into the industry kind of indirectly through that route. I've been with La Fosse for 13 years and joined primarily when La Fosse was a recruitment business. And my role was very much about working with customers to understand what they were looking for when they were thinking about building their teams. And actually, we saw a big gap in the market for creating opportunities for people who are starting out their career in tech. And so 6 years ago, I launched the La Fosse Academy, which was all about creating opportunities for people who wouldn't have maybe had those opportunities otherwise. And it's something that I'm personally really passionate about as well, because I've seen the impact both from a customer perspective in terms of them not necessarily having routes to have access to diverse, brilliant talent coming through. And I've also seen the other side where I see amazing people who maybe haven't had the opportunities. And if you just give them the opportunities, how incredible they can be in terms of rewriting the future of the tech industry.
yes. I love that. So, one thing on here, I never know what people are going to say. A lot of people on here, though, do tend to say, I didn't know I was going to end up in the tech industry. It wasn't planned. And we hear that so often, and you must hear that so often in your job as well, that people just kind of fall into tech and then they realize actually it was a happy accident and it was the best thing that ever happened to them. So interesting that you took a test and that you were destined for sales. I was told once I was destined to be a florist
Oh,
when
really?
I when I took that test. It's bizarre when you take those at school. Um, was there anything, any kind of role models when you were younger, where or lack of role models at least? If you were that one of those people, which there's so many people that are like, I don't know what I want to do. Did you feel that there was kind of a lack of role models around you to kind of direct you in like what to do? Like, even at university, we get told a lot of students get there and then they go, I still didn't know even when I graduated because there was no one around to kind of inspire me in a certain direction.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the education system is not necessarily set up for vocational um, aspects. It's
Yeah.
much more about giving people a rounded education, but it doesn't necessarily set them up for the real world of work. And I see it as well. I'm a mother. I've got two young girls, and
Oh,
already at such a young age, like my eldest is 6, and she already is starting to think about what role she wants to do. And they ask, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And it's always the traditional roles that you hear people talk about, right? It's I want to be a doctor, I want to be a builder, the things that they see day to day. But it's
yeah.
very rare that you get people say, I want to work in the tech industry. And people even knowing that these roles exist, I think that's actually a big part of the problem. So it's as much about people having access, yes, but also having a view of what actually exists out there and understanding that there is more than just what you might see going through life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Definitely, and unless you have somebody that is around you that's doing it, or to choose that subject at university, or I had a lady on here the other day. She said actually my family ran a training company in tech. I was like, well, that was pretty lucky. So she,
Amazing.
she was always around that, and she kind of knew what she wanted to go into. But that is very, very rare that you hear that type of thing. But even nowadays, you would think that more children would be more aware of the types of roles that are available, but it's still not quite there. So unfortunately, we do still hear the people that say, fell into tech. As long as people keep falling into tech, it's fine. And there is lots of work, obviously, to get people to come into the industry and choose a career there, which a lot is being done by yourself as well. So, but you have been recognised in the Women in Tech 100. And what I wanted to know was what first inspired your passion for championing women and underrepresented groups into tech?
Yeah, of course. I think it comes back to that point that we talked about just there, which is access.
Yeah.
So I see so many people who are really passionate about tech, but haven't been able to actually turn that into a career. And it's not actually because they lack ability, but it's because of the barriers that people don't actually even think about that exist within the tech industry. Things like you need a certain degree to get into the tech space, right? You need to have the right connections. You know, exactly as you said, the person that you spoke to whose parent ran a tech training company has connections in the industry. That helps. And then the third piece is exactly as we just said there, you know, knowing that tech is even an option for people, right? And so what we see a lot of is that people get interested and realize that they're interested in a career in tech later on in their career, and they're already down a different path. So then it
Yeah.
becomes really difficult to make that shift. And actually, one of the big pieces on our program is that 50% of our people are career changers. And I
Wow.
think that's really important because it shows that it's never too late to actually make that change if you're passionate about it, and that there are routes to turn that passion into a career, even if you haven't necessarily started off thinking that that's where you wanted to end up. So yeah, I think it's about really removing those barriers. That's where the passion stemmed from me, and being able to help people realize their passion every day.
That's so interesting because that's such a big number of people that are switching careers. And we do get loads of career switches in our community. And it's something as well that employers need to recognize that exactly what you just said, that not everybody is taking that traditional route. You're not always going to be finding those computer science graduates that are coming through the system. And also those that are coming through, they're yet to experience baptism of fire coming into the workplace anyway, and they don't have experience. Whereas a career switcher might have been in work 10, 15 years already. They have all of that wonderful experience that comes with just being in work and the politics of work and working on a team and leadership, but they're going to transition into learning tech. And sometimes I think it's just employers being more open as well to thinking, actually, she has so many good soft skills and skills that transition into tech. Now she's trained, and she might not have all of the training that we're looking for, but we could do that. Sometimes I think it's just employers agreeing to make that little extra investment in that person because they would get so much more out of that person. She would be so much more loyal as well and stay at that company compared to perhaps a graduate that might hop around a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest piece that we see is that we call it diversity of thought, but really that's what it is that career changers bring. You know, they've worked in that real life environment. They understand exactly as you say how to deal with stakeholders, the politics of work. Those are normally the challenges that you actually get with people who are early careers or starting in an industry. It's often this, we always call it attitude as important as aptitude. And
Yeah.
that's mostly, if you speak to customers and employers, the biggest challenges they have with early careers is not the technical skills, because you can learn that. It's actually the attitude and the things that you gain from having a wealth of experience in the industry. So we see a lot of our career changers as being really, really successful in terms of their careers, even though they didn't have a traditional route to get into the tech space to start with.
Yes, yeah, you must do. Those people as well, they to decide to want to do that halfway through a career is that's not for the faint-hearted. So
No,
that is somebody that is committed and really, going to get and just some of those boot camps as well and those training, they can be expensive and time consuming. It depends what you're doing and depends what is suited for you. But for somebody to make a decision to want to do that, they must be very committed to the cause and thinking, this is it, I'm going to go into tech and make a success of that.
absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's a barrier, right? If you can't afford to do a program like that, then, that option becomes not available to you again. So our course is free for the students, and we were very intentional about that so that we could remove all of those barriers that exist. We don't
Yeah.
look at people's background, we don't look at their CV. Anyone can apply, and everyone is put through the same process, and we select the best people based on their merit and their ability versus ability to pay, for example.
I love that. Yes, because some of those courses, you they are very expensive, and it's such a big decision. If you're already in work, and you might have a mortgage at that point, you might have a family and children, and you're kind of thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, I'd love to do something new, but how do I fit this in? So as long as, like you said, you've got a good attitude and you want to do that, I love that it's open to everybody to give that a go. Um, the idea of rewriting routes into tech is a powerful one, but what do you think is broken about traditional pathways into the industry?
Um, Great question. I think if you think about the traditional routes into tech, they are very credential based versus capability
Yeah,
based. And also, what we'll see a lot is that organizations will say, we want to invest in junior talent. We want people at the early stages of their career. But then when you look at the job description, they say we need 2 years of experience. So then
yeah,
it becomes impossible for people to get the first 2 years of experience, because how do you get that first in if everyone is looking for a junior with 2 years of experience, right? So when we think about how do we kind of change that traditional path, we filter for people who have potential versus who have done the right path, right? So
yeah,
um, what we're seeing is that with AI as well, things are evolving and shifting quite significantly. A lot of companies are investing a lot less in junior talent because they think that parts of that role can be automated. So it becomes even more challenging to get that first route into tech if you haven't necessarily got the background, the experience, etc. And so I think that's why having different and structured pathways is really important, because it's not just about looking at credentials, what degree someone's done, what prior experience they have, but it's also about having routes to be able to assess their potential and their capability, because it comes back down to that. If they've got the attitude and the potential, they can learn the skills. Um, and tech is so broad as well. This is the other thing, right? So
yeah.
people think, I want to get into tech, I want to be a software engineer. We see that all the time. And especially now with data and AI, people are maybe saying, I want to get into, AI automation engineering or something. But they think tech equals developer. But actually, there are so many broad roles across the tech industry. Um, so it's about educating people as well that you don't have to be the best coder to get a role in tech. There's a variety of different routes and pathways that you can be in the tech industry without necessarily being the most technical person in the room.
Yes, yes. Couldn't agree more on what you just said. You don't have to be the most technical person to be in tech. Um, and you must see quite a few people come through who have kind of heard that misconception as well about being in tech, and what people think their job is actually going to be like. And we hear quite a few community members say something similar. I agree that some companies, especially with what they're looking for, it does put a lot of people off. We get told by community members all the time that they see roles, they're applying, they're training, but they're not always applying. So there are lots of things that put off women as well, thinking, oh, I don't tick all the boxes, especially if you see, 1 to 2 years experience. But when we talk to our partners, they say sometimes we'd just love to hear, ladies that have potential. And I think that sometimes your job applications can be putting people off. They're not thinking, oh, I'll just go for it. They've read something and thought, I'm just not going to apply in the first place. I love the fact though that you said that you look for potential, because I've always thought this with CVs. We talk to a lot of recruiters, obviously, in our field of work, and they always say about using your CV as a way to tell your story rather than just listing your job roles, because it's exactly that. If you're listing, just a set of skills, that's great. You might be found, or you might be found on LinkedIn easily, but you haven't actually said how you use those skills or how you delivered a project, or like, and then people can't see the potential in you, that they're looking for something that you might not even have yet, but they don't know how you used those skills because you didn't actually talk about your own story and how you delivered a project. Actually, in your application program process, do you ask for things like that? Kind of how do you pick out somebody's potential? I take it it's not just a standard show us your CV and
Not at all. And we don't even use CVs. We don't look at a CV at all. So as we were very intentional about that as well, because our view is that if we are really looking for potential, it doesn't matter what background someone's come from.
yeah,
And so we put everyone through the same application process, but that first they have to write an application. They then have to do a psychometric assessment, followed by a technical assessment, followed by an open day where there's a group exercise that they do to see how they interact with others, and then a one-on-one interview. So it's a very rigorous process to get into our course, but not once
yeah,
is it based on what they've done previously. It's all
yeah,
based on how do they problem solve, how do they work with people, how resilient are they, how do they take on feedback, all the core capabilities that we know are important for someone to thrive in a role in tech. Those are the things that we're assessing for versus what degree did they do, what background did they come from, what connections do they have, etc. And actually, a lot of what we do is educate customers as well that you don't need to look at a CV, right? So often, exactly as you say, when a customer is looking to hire, they're used to working with recruitment companies and seeing a CV and then making a decision on who they want to meet with based on the CV. Our approach is that we spend time with our customers getting to know what are the core capabilities you're looking for? What do these people need to do? And then because we're training people throughout our program, we get to know where their strengths are, what their capabilities are. And then we will match those people with the customers based on what they're looking for. And we don't share a CV with the customer. We have a profile that says, this is why we think this person is great for the opportunity that they're going to be doing within your organization. But we don't share a CV very intentionally. And we say, come in, do a group session, meet with the people, because that's how you get to see the potential. It doesn't matter what background they've come from.
yes. Oh, I love that, especially seeing them, meeting them, and seeing them in action can make such a difference. I feel like so we run a hackathon every International Women's Day, and getting to see our community members in action is so different than seeing, like you said, listed on a CV would be so different as to how they come out of themselves and how they work as a team. And we literally throw them into teams with complete strangers and just give them a theme and feed them all day and make sure that they're moving along in their projects. But it's always such a surprise to us as to what they come up with and challenges that they've overcome. And you don't get all of that from a CV. You're so right. It is something from just putting people in a challenging environment, at least, to see how they respond to each other as well, is a good point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's always the hardest bit, isn't it? When you see it's not just about their technical skills. Actually, in a work environment, they're going to be working with stakeholders. They're going to be working as part of a team. They need to have the behaviors as well as the skills to be able to thrive. And actually, that's where we see a lot of people fall down. People that are really strong technically, but they don't pass our course because actually they don't work well as a team, or they don't turn up for work on time, or the things you can't test in an interview, but you do actually see when you're running a training program and they're having to interact with other people in the same way that they would in a real life working environment.
Yes.
Those are the things that are as important, if not more important, actually, when you're starting your career.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, it is a something as well. It is the baptism of fire of when you go to work, and having people, especially already into their careers, that know all of that. Like they've done all of that. Now they're just, excited to learn something new. Um, Definitely would make a difference there. So on that note, then, can you tell me all about La Fosse Academy, and how it creates opportunities for people who might not otherwise see tech as accessible to them. You said that you launched it 6 years ago. Is that correct?
Right.
What happened there? What
Yeah,
what
yeah, of
happened there,
course.
and how has it grown?
Yeah, of course. So I think, as I said, we launched out of our recruitment business, and really it was in response to what we were hearing from our customers in terms of they were looking for routes to build more diverse tech teams. And also, we wanted to create an opportunity which wasn't just around moving the existing talent around the market, but create opportunities to create more talent for the industry, right? So really, Academy was born, and at its core, it's all about potential. So we take people from diverse backgrounds that traditionally wouldn't have had access to tech careers, whether they're career changers or really smart graduates, or people that didn't even have degrees. We train them up in the relevant tech skills, and then we place them into real life roles in a real life environment and support them through a structured program. And I guess a big part of what we do and why it's important is that it's free. So that removes a huge barrier to entry for a lot of people that might not have the means to pay for traditional courses. But also, I think one of the key points is, we touched on it before, is that the academy is built around creating real world capability. So at university, you might study theory if you study computer science, but it doesn't necessarily prepare you for what you need to do in the real world. So our training is very much about creating environments that allow people to see what a real life tech environment is like. And then increasingly, more recently as well, a lot of our program is around preparing people to think about how their roles evolve with AI as well. And that's not just for people that are entering the tech space. We also can see a big shift in people who have been working in the tech space for years and years and years. And typically, we're seeing three types of behavior at the moment. So we've got people who are kind of leaning in and experimenting with AI. You've got people that are kind of letting it happen around them. And then you've got people who are actively avoiding it. And actually, what we're seeing is that the reality is that roles are changing. If people don't adapt, they will get probably left behind. So there's two routes now to the academy. So the first part is about bringing in new talent and training them in the relevant skills. But also, we're doing a lot of work in upskilling existing talent as well within organizations. And we've just been approved as an apprenticeship provider. So we can run those
Wow.
upskilling programs funded through the skills levy as well, to make sure that we're not just creating pathways for new talent to enter the industry, but actually we're future proofing people who've been in the industry for a long time and getting them ready for what's happening next as well.
Yes, I love that. Do you also get have you seen a shift, I suppose, as well, in less students wanting to go to university and actually coming your way instead, and thinking, actually, I just might as well take an academy like this, and going really early, instead of, university is suddenly very expensive, and again, you might not actually figure out what you even want to do at university. But have you seen kind of an uptick in that?
Yeah, we have actually, and interestingly, we have a cohort in training at the moment, and there's this brilliant lady who's come straight out of school. She didn't go to university, but it was an active choice that she said, you know what,
Mm.
I want to get my foot in the door. I really want to start my career. And I think that's amazing. It's brilliant. She'll have a head start on some of her peers who have decided to take the university route. I do think that there is a lot that you gain from, if you choose the university route, through having structured learning programs and interacting with peers and getting the independence and life experience that you get. But I think in terms of getting a head start in the industry, like deciding to go straight into it, and programs like this are really geared to prepare people for the real world. So yeah, absolutely. Like, I think there's different routes that people can take. I think as well, people hear the word apprenticeship and they think it's people at the early stages of their career. But what we're also seeing is that you can utilize the levy to upskill people who might have been in their career for years and years and years, leaders. We're upskilling team leads, executives of organizations to think about how does AI impact their day-to-day role, as well as people in the first stages of their careers and first role into tech. So it is really a case of how are we creating a workforce which is prepared for the future of skills, especially
Yeah.
now with this rapidly changing AI world that we're living in as well.
Yeah, and people are they are suddenly thinking, is my job going to be needed, or and I still do think a lot of those jobs are very needed, and we're always going to need a human, but there will be less of those jobs around. So you're right, people finding a way to change what they're doing at least and to evolve is definitely needed. So yeah, doing that mid-career and thinking of an apprenticeship is a really wise choice at the minute, especially in AI. Um, from your experience, what are the biggest barriers women still face when entering or progressing in tech, and how can organisations better address them?
I think confidence is definitely a big one, and visibility as well. So I think a lot of women have the capability, but they don't necessarily have access to the same opportunities, the same networks, role models, as we said before. And it starts really early. So, I mean, you'll know this, I'm sure, from the community, but only 19% of the people that study computer science are female, right?
Yeah,
So if that's the main route into tech, or the most traditional route into tech, then already the talent pool is very limited or skewed. And I see it again, like with my kids, right? Thinking about what are the roles that they could be open to, and thinking about it early. So I think really it's about representation, role models, and also like educating and showing people what's possible as early as possible. And then when you're in the workplace, I think people talk about mentorship a lot, but actually it's about sponsorship, because mentorship gives people advice, but sponsorship is what creates opportunity.
yeah.
So I think that's really the key element.
Yes, I love the topic of sponsorship. I have had so many good, just brilliant sponsors who have all been men, and male sponsors in the workplace. They are the ones who, I agree, they open doors. They talk about you in a positive light when you are not in the room. They are the people that push you forward for the next opportunity and say all the right things when you're not around. And it is so important because you're right, you can learn a lot from mentorship, but having that cheerleader for you when you're not there to push you forward in your career really does open doors to women to get them through to leadership at least, because so many companies say, the women, they're not in leadership roles. How do we get them into leadership roles? And that really is the key to doing that, to encouraging them to not just go through the ranks, but stay as well, and for companies to retain their women in tech as well. We touched upon mentorship a little bit there, and representation. They're themes that you're very passionate about. You mentioned that you have daughters as well. Can you share an example of how these have made a real difference in someone's career journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have so many examples of people who have gained confidence through mentorship, through the program, having the structured support. I mean, one example is a lady that we had in the program who had come from a non-traditional tech background. She'd studied law previously, and she'd again came into our course thinking that she wanted to go into software engineering, and then her eyes were opened to the world of business analysis and project management, and then secured a role with a large media business as a business analyst. She through getting involved in all of the networks and mentoring, and also we partnered her with a mentor from our program, it really helped her confidence. And as a result of that, she started bringing together some of the wider groups within the organization. She started winning awards. She started to really come out of her shell. And from someone that actually started off with a big question mark about herself, am I right for the tech industry, to now she's, 4 years into her placement with that organization. She's been promoted twice already, and she's
Oh,
been
wow.
earmarked, as someone who's like, a future superstar of the organization. And that is quite amazing, really. And I think that's all down to having, the confidence that you get from having a mentor. We've also seen it. So La Fosse have a women in tech community called Unbound And part of Unbound, we've built a mentor program, which looks at what people are looking to gain from mentorship and give from mentorship, and then we partner people together. And there was at the most recent event I was at, there was a story that came from one of the people I was talking to who'd been one of her team had been on the mentor program, and she had been in a mentoring session with her mentor, and they talked about a concept that really clicked with her. And she was so excited and enthusiastic about that concept that she said, can I bring it back to the team and can I take it to the wider organization? So in that moment, there were two things. Firstly, the confidence piece, right? She felt that she was confident enough from learning something to then being able to lead a conversation within the team about it. And then the second piece was it actually had a really big ripple effect. So the wider team then started saying, oh, I want a mentor. And it wasn't just the females, it was the males as well. They were like, how come she gets a mentor and she gets all of this extra learning?
Ah,
I want that too. So I think that's the power of it as well, is that if you give people access, support, the right environment, you unlock that confidence and potential that maybe wouldn't have surfaced otherwise.
yes. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and the power of network that when that gets around, other people want to get involved. We have lots of men say to us, I'd love to get involved. Where do I get started? And we always say mentoring because they seem to think, if you see women in tech on the agenda at a conference, that's all the women disappearing into a little room on their own and all talking amongst themselves. And actually, it's not. There's lots of male allies in there that want to get involved and want to be part of that conversation, and just don't know where to start. Um, but yeah, that confidence piece, we hear that constantly, and finding as well, like your academy, opportunities that are open to all to be able to dip your toe in and not have to worry about it financially, for instance, and then realizing maybe that wasn't for me. Like that's okay as well. If you do try something and you think, well, that wasn't for me, that's okay. I'll try something else. I love that she went on and found like project management and other options as well, because a lot of our ladies, we hear that they go, I didn't know I'd actually pretty much been a project manager my entire career. I just didn't know that those were the skills that I was doing. I just needed somebody to guide me into that role. And then actually I realized that that was what I was doing anyway. I just needed somebody to tell me that and show me next steps. But like you said, it's sometimes the representation and being able to see people in their roles and what they're doing is so important to actually see it in real life. I don't know if you've heard this, but we get quite a few people tell us their husbands work in tech, and in COVID, in lockdown, they got to see what their husbands were doing, and there was a few ladies who said, "Oh, my husband was a scrum master," and I thought, "Well, that's a really good job." And there was one lady, she's now a junior developer. I think she's a senior developer now at M&S, and she retrained because her husband was in tech, and she saw that when she was at home in COVID, and she worked as a academic, and she said, you have to be on site and you have to be in school, and I wanted a job where I could work from home and be with my family. So she retrained because she looked over her husband's shoulder and thought, I could do that.
Yeah, we see that so much as well. Like when we're doing the interviews for the program, I've had that story so many times of people saying, I didn't realize. And then my husband, and actually I've heard the COVID piece as well. So it must be, people spending more time at home and hearing what their other half is doing
Yeah.
spikes some education really about what roles exist and what it actually means.
Yeah, it definitely did open some people's eyes into, oh, well, that's what it's like to work in tech. I could do that. Um, for someone though that's listening who's considering a career change into tech, but they feel unsure or intimidated, what advice would you give them to take the first step?
I think my biggest advice would be open-minded. A lot of people, especially if they're entering the tech space, they think that the career is linear. But what we see day in, day out, and you've probably seen this as well, is that it's really not. Every
Yeah,
CTO that you speak to has taken a completely different route to get to their role.
yeah,
And all the roles are changing and shifting and evolving all the time as well on top of that. So I always think of it's almost like a game of snakes and ladders. It's not just about climbing the ranks. Sometimes you've got to move sideways, you go downwards, you go backwards to go forwards. But that's not failure necessarily. It's progression. And I think as well, people think they have to have it all figured out, but you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need a way in and a
Yes.
route to get started, right? You don't need any permission. You just need that option to get going. So yeah, I think just be open-minded. If you've got the right attitude, you can learn the skills and just go.
Yeah. It's such good advice because I think that's something we're told at school as well,
Yeah,
where it's you pick your career route, that's what you're doing, especially with really traditional careers. Like if you want to be a lawyer, you go to law school and you're going to go in and do that, and that's your only path. And actually, when you do talk to people that have been in work 15 years, for instance, they're like, I've taken so many different routes. And like you said, sometimes you go sideways, and sometimes as well, life happens and you need to change jobs or locations. You might have family, you might have parents that you need to look after, or all of those things affect that you might change jobs suddenly, and nothing to do with your original career route. You just needed some downtime to because life happens,
mm,
and then you can go back and ramp back on and go, or move into something completely different as well. I do think, though, that is something that we get in our heads from a very young age, that we
agree.
can't do that, or that we almost should be shameful that we want to move around and do it later in life. Like that's not
Mm,
okay. But yeah, it's lots of people do it, and I think the more that we share those stories, and the more that we hear the stories like what you told that you hear in your academy, the more it inspires other people to think, oh, actually, I could definitely give that a try.
yeah, exactly. And that's it. We're always thinking about how do we get to the next stage. When you're at school, it's from primary school to secondary school and then university, and then you get a job. But then when you enter the world of work, life is so different. It's
Yeah,
not necessarily all laid out for you in the same way that it has been, but because we're programmed to accept things in that way, it becomes a bit of a shock to the system. And that's probably the baptism of fire that you referred
yeah.
back to. And we see that so much. So that's the advice I give to everyone that's starting the course is don't be closed-minded to anything. Just be open-minded. You don't even know what roles exist yet. So just be open to it, and your career can go in lots of different routes. But if you have the right attitude, then you'll thrive.
Yes. I love that. That is brilliant advice, and brilliant advice to end on, because we are already at the end. I could keep chatting to you on this topic for the rest of the afternoon. But thank you, Claudia, so much for chatting with us on Spilling the Tea, telling us all about the Fosse Academy. And we'll include a link in the blurb to this as well, so our community can find out more. But thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure picking your brains today.
Thank you for having me. It's been brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And for everybody listening, as always, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you again next time.